So this is the last module, module 10, before we do our workshop next week. So we're going to be covering safety field reviews. Just a reminder, we want to give you all the tools to be able to determine and solve safety issues on our roadways. That is the whole purpose of this academy. We understand the problems, emphasis areas, learn how to solve them, understand the best ways to use data, and then actually get your hands a little dirty working on an actual project. And this is where we are in the academy. We are, the last module, like I said earlier, and then next week is the safety evaluation workshop. So for this module, we're going to cover 3 main learning objectives. We want to learn how to perform a safety field review, do a little compare and contrast with safety field reviews versus road safety audits, and then just really drive home the importance of completing safety field reviews. Reiterating again, we want to know what a safety field review is, how to perform it, the differences, and then we're going to go over some tools available to assist you all with performing a safety field review. So we'll jump right into it. So what are safety field reviews? So it is a review that aims to examine a location in order to look for safety defects that we can incorporate into the design of a project. So it's a good mix of fieldwork and data analysis. And this is performed by generally the internal design or study team. So if you're working on a project, we're going to be the ones performing the safety field review to incorporate into your design. We're going to go over now the key aspects. So pictures are a great thing for safety field review. You're going to go out in the field. You want to take pictures of what you're actually seeing, pictures of any safety issues, defects. It'd be awesome to get actual road users of all types. So for this picture, we have bicyclists in the protected bike lane. See how users are actually using the corridor or the intersection. Obviously, you're going to want to label the pictures of what you're trying to capture. Projects take a long time. So you want to make sure you know what you were looking at, label it. So if you go back to review it, you know exactly what's going on. And pictures also are just a much easier way to convey information quicker to a client, a reader, anyone else that you're trying to get the information across to for safety issues or what you're seeing in the field. So when you're out in the field, you're going to want to look for any issues of damage or maintenance. So in this image, this stop sign and one-way sign had been struck. So obviously that traffic control device is not effective if it is laying on the side of the road. So note anything that's relatively easy to fix, and anything else. If you're saying, like when I've gone out for field reviews, I've noticed that push buttons were getting, stub poles of push buttons were getting knocked down because trucks were over tracking. So note things like that you can incorporate later into your design. Other information you're going to want to look at, you're going to want to pull speed data, ADT. If there's a signal involved, you want to see what timing's being run. Any truck percentages, if it's a heavy truck corridor, that'll affect your recommendations. Look at roadway characteristics, the context classification, the posted speed, is there a bunch of curves? And if there's any ped bike count or any of that sort of data, you definitely want to get that before you head out. So when do you actually need to perform a review? It is important to look at safety even when the project's main focus isn't necessarily safety. So like for network screening, it can be enhanced by just looking at common issues in the field that result in similar type crashes at different locations. If you have a major design project or safety study, it would be great to go out in the field, see what's actually happening. All the data is great, but sometimes you need to get out in the field to see why things are happening the way they are. So we're going to go into actually performing safety field review. So there's 4 main steps. So you're going to want to collect all your data prior to the field visit, and then perform a historical crash analysis, and then you're going to go out and actually do your field observations. And then you'll summarize everything, usually in a report or a memo at the end with your findings and your recommendations. So for collecting data, safety obviously is important. So you're going to want to collect 5 years of previous crash data, and also review information from central office's safety needs list dashboard. So if there's another priority location within a half-mile of your location, you'll want to get more crash data and supplement as needed. And then it's important to review any information from the work program from the last 5 years and for the next 5 years. Projects may be planned that'll address some safety issues, so you can always note that you are seeing this today, but if there's a program that's planned in the next few years that should be addressed, and you might want to reevaluate. Or there's instances where there's been a work program, like say 3 years ago, that had addressed some safety concerns. So you might want to just check the crash data, say like, if this improvement was made, it should affect crashes X, Y, and Z. Make sure it is, and then you can note that as well in your report. You want to consider your context classification, and especially if there's any future developments that may change your future, like your classification. You don't want to design for one classification if very soon it's going to shift to another. You might want to take that into account. Look at historical ADT, turning movement counts if they have it, and once again, anything with bicycle and pedestrians. Any data on those would be really helpful. So if there's any intersections, especially signalized, you're going to want to pull timing plans, see what's actually being run out in the field, and as-built plans. When I pull it for my projects, I like to see when the last time these permits have been updated. Usually it gives you a good feel for how much change you need to do, or if the red and yellow clearance intervals are still going to be applicable, or they need to be updated. Yeah, I just like to see when the last time it's been touched. Usually gives you a good idea of how many upgrades or safety improvements there will be. And then any other specific data, you want to look for existing land use, future developments, photography. And then if there is transit, that's really important just to see when the stops are occurring in your either intersection or corridor area. And then it would be important to, when you're on your field observations, you want to be there at a time where transit will be running and making those stops, pickups, and drops, and see how that is interacting with the rest of the road users. So once you get all your data, you're going to perform a historical crash analysis. So you can see there's some data on the screen from Signal 4 Analytics. You want to take this, you want to summarize location, time, severity, causes. What you're going to want to do is look for trends. Any patterns you can find that can help you make safety improvements, or when you go out in the field, if you say, oh, there's a lot of run up the road crashes, you want to see what's going on out there. Maybe there's like damaged guardrail. Maybe there's a really steep curve without any proper warning signs. Maybe a warning sign got knocked down. You just want to look and see why those crash patterns and trends are occurring. Another way that I think is super helpful, and you should prepare, is a collision diagram. So it's a way to visualize where these crashes are occurring. So you can see that there's the key. So rear end, head on, side swipe, and angle crashes occurred at this intersection. And then you have a legend also going over if the roadway was dry, wet, it was a night, if there was an injury or fatal, during the day, alcohol or drug related. So if you look at this collision diagram, I'll ask for you all, is there any patterns of crashes you guys can see, identify? You can go off mute or write them in the chat. Yeah, definitely some angles, which is not super surprising at an intersection, but yep, good cluster of angles. And then there's also, yeah, eastbound lanes, yes, yeah. There's some rear ends, which also is very common crash type for intersections. And then if you, I think you guys see my cursor, but there are two, for me, when I look at it, the two that jump out are there's two head-on collisions. Yes, yeah, head on. That makes me a little, I would like to take a closer look at that west leg in the field to try to figure out why those are occurring, because those aren't normally a very common crash type for intersections. So those two would be good. This west leg would be great to keep an eye on. Nathan? I thought I heard you come with me. Sorry. But yeah, so that west leg would be a good to try to figure out why those are occurring. So when you go out to the field to actually do your review, you're going to want to definitely go for the morning and evening peak hours. Also perform a nighttime field review. It's very helpful to go out there during the night, see if the lighting conditions are appropriate for what's going on, and any additional observations. So if there's a school nearby, you'll want to go during pickup, drop off, potentially during trash pickup as well. So it's any of those periods. And also when you're reviewing the crash data, so this is an example I had from personally, I found a really odd trend. Well, I'm in Pennsylvania, but where between the hours of like 1 to 3, there was a really high spike of crashes. So we went out and observed, and it turned out from where the sun was hitting the roadway, it had just this very odd glare that was causing a crash issue. So we ended up putting up signs just to let people know that during certain hours the glare was, but it's one of those things. If you see anything odd, peak crashes in the time, you want to go out in the field and during that time period and see what's going on. Nathan?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, looking at when definitely when you see that there's crash patterns happening, something interesting too. Just to adding to the conversation of unique field reviews we've been on, where there's something we didn't expect. We were dealing on US 17, an angle crash situation from a side street, and there should have been no issue. The corridor was lit. There was massive sight lines. Like there's no issue. You could see wide open. We couldn't figure out why people were getting hit. There wasn't, and it wasn't congested, so there's large gaps. What we found in the field review, though, is if you approach from the side street, if you approach the stop bar at a certain speed, oncoming traffic was at just the right speed that it stayed behind the A pillar of the vehicle. So if like if someone didn't come to a complete stop and look, they would never have known the vehicle was there if they're going to do a rolling stop. So it is critical sometimes to look through those patterns and figure out why it's going, and knowing when they're happening, to be able to get out there and actually see it and experience it somewhat for yourself.
Absolutely. So when you're actually out in the field, so here's some prompts you want to look at. So for sidewalks, you want to ask, are they provided? What condition are they in? With AD accessible? Same thing with driveways. Is there a large density of them? Could they be causing issues? Are they really close to intersections? Are they interacting negatively? I guess I'll ask for everyone else. Are there any other questions you can think of would be good to ask for these two, like sidewalks or driveways, if you're out in a field review? I say some others could be, will it properly accommodate pedestrians? Oh, Billy.
Yeah, I was going to say if they're, I guess this is might need to elaborate more. But comfortable in the sense of like
Yeah,
sidewalks, how close are they to the roadway, the speed of the road, and I guess it encompasses width also.
yeah, absolutely. Think about if, like, we've had that picture where the sidewalk wasn't connected to anything, so like connectivity. Um, if there's a school nearby or elderly people, you might want to make sure, they're accommodating all pedestrians. Yep.
All right, I was going to add possible impacts in construction, like said, like how would the design or the construction of our project would affect the existing sidewalks too.
Yeah, that's definitely important to keep in mind. You want to make sure those accessible routes are still available during construction.
Definitely want to hit on that as well. I mean, walking field reviews for your MOT, right? Because even if there aren't a high number of pedestrians, if there still are pedestrians, where are you putting them? I watched a permit project down the street from my house. They closed the sidewalk, and the next crossing was probably 3/4 of a mile at a signal the other way, but people were trying to get our way. So they're not going to, when you think if you're trying to get past that, you're not going to walk 3/4 of a mile down, wait for a signal, cross over, and then walk 3/4 of a mile back to where you need to be. So what you ended up seeing is I would see people that would wait for a gap in the cars and they'd walk down US 17 in the travel lane to get around that permit site. And that's something where we can blame the user, but at the same time, like we've created a situation that makes it extremely easy for that person to fail, and a situation that any one of us probably would make the same decision that they did. So I 100% agree with Billy. That's a great point of getting out there and walking MOT zones as well.
Absolutely. Some others from the chat. So are there any bikes? Yep, that's super important to note. The bikes are using the sidewalks, which they really shouldn't be. Are they provided on both sides of the road? Yeah, absolutely. And shading. Yeah. Is it yeah, what Billy said, is it comfortable, or you're gonna, if it's shaded, it's more comfortable to walk? Oh, tripping hazards. That's a great one. Yeah. If it's not safe to walk on, that's great to note. So looking at some roadway prompts. So you want to look at pavement condition. What condition are the pavement markings in? Or do they have the proper pavement markings for what's going on? Any geometry concerns for alignment, vertical or horizontal? Is there parking present that'll change things? And any medians or channelization? And what does the lighting look like on I guess I'll ask the same question. Is there any other questions you all can think of that would be good to consider, or anything else to consider when you're looking at mostly just the roadway? Here's what you're focused on. Drainage issues. Yep, that could be definitely a huge one. Billy?
This kind of goes back to what you said before in terms of the crash studies. Like, doing that crash analysis before you do a field review, so you could, go on the site to see like, okay, what do I see that could be the cause of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Also from the chat, running at the shoulder. Yeah, looking at that damage, what's going on. But yeah, drainage is a big one. Sorry. Go, Nathan.
No, the shorter one's a good comment too, because when you're thinking about the field review, if we're doing this in service of a project, when you look at the life cycle of that, you're probably in design. You could be in a planning or PD&E study, but you've got, another anywhere from 6 months, 2 years plus, depending on the size of your design, until you get to end of design. And then you have your construction letting, and then finally it's constructed, right? So you probably have at least a couple years before it's final built in the best case scenario, more in an average scenario. So some of those those issues like shoulder maintenance, whether it's the shoulder building up over the asphalt and holding water on the roadway, or whether it's rutting. So if someone left their lane, they'd have a hard time getting back on. There's a lot of value to finding those short-term fixes and having a good relationship with your operation centers to be able to go to them and say, hey guys, like we have a project, but these are some issues that we saw while we were out there. Can we get them squared away?
Absolutely. And also in the chat, bike lanes. Yeah. Is there the right mix for the road users? And then I think Lori, I just saw your hand up.
For vertical alignment, I mean, I think I would be able to tell if there was something significant added for vertical alignment, but is that something that people go out and measure, or like, I guess you have to have a trained eye in certain cases?
I think it's, when I go out and do it, I would note it, and then I would probably go tag in my roadway people and be like, can you take a closer look at it? Because I can, yeah, exactly. Visually, you're like, this, something's messed a little funky, but I think a big part of safety field review is that you make these observations, and then sometimes they do require further study. So that might be where you tag in someone that has a little bit more experience in that realm. So moving on, so when you're at stop controlled specific intersections, you want to look at, once again, pavement markings, signage. Are pedestrians there? Is there marked crossings? Is it ADA compliant? Drainage, lighting, spacing with other intersections, sight distance issues, everything in terms of that. Just making sure that people are also following the traffic control signs. When you're observing, you want to see, are these people stopping at the stop bar, or are they rolling through? And then making sure that if there is pedestrian crossing, they're also being mindful of that and not just plowing through that area or stopping in the middle of the crosswalk. And then if there is any transit in your study area, you definitely want to look at the stops. Are they accessible? How do people get to the bus? Are they walking on a sidewalk? Do they have to cross the street? Is there a marked crossing for that? Are bus lanes on the corridor present? And is there just a shelter, a bench, a landing pad for the pedestrians to wait to get onto transit? And then everybody mentioned this, you just want to look at how the road users are behaving. So specifically for pedestrians, like why are they walking? So in this image, you can see it's taken near a college. So there are a lot of college students. So they're walking to class and they're going to class and from their apartments back at home. And how you want to look at how pedestrians actually using the infrastructure. Are they using the sidewalks? Are they using the marked crossings? And then one of the bigger ones is, are they often in conflict with vehicles? You want to make sure that if there's conflicts, how you want to see how things are being handled with both sets of road users. But that would be the big ones to look at. Is there anything else anyone can think of that would be good to note for pedestrian behavior when you're observing out in the field?
I think how they're using it is a very important one.
Mhm.
Knowing what they're actually using. We did a field review a couple weeks ago, and someplace we didn't expect there to be a lot of activity. And it was a series of blind curves, like 6 blind curves in a 1.5 mile section, and people were using the through lanes on scooters and bicycles. So I think being able to see that and knowing that while we might not have room for a sidewalk, putting a shoulder in that case would give people the ability to get out of the roadway or see where people are actually crossing the road. Because while we have standards for, placements of mid-block devices, for instance, we can always deviate with good reason. So, maybe using the exact specific standard doesn't put it in the right place, but we can modify it to put it in a place where people are actually going to use it. And then in the chat, Lori says groups and clusters versus individual pedestrians. Lois says strollers and wheelchairs. Kelly says, are they just walking, biking, skateboarding, hoverboards? So a little bit of micromobility there. And then Robert wants to know if they're crossing away from the intersection.
Mhm. All great things to keep an eye out for. Yeah, how hot is it? Yeah, dealing with inclement weather. Yeah, if there's not enough shade or rest areas potentially, that definitely is something else to look at as well. So then bicyclists, you want to know, are there bicycle facilities? How are bicyclists navigating intersection corridors? And also important to know, are they often in conflicts with vehicles? Or, for example, like do motorists seem to give bicyclists a hard time? I know not everyone loves that cyclists share the roadway. So I feel like it could be a potential issue. So if you know that drivers are not respecting the bike lanes, or if there's bike boxes, maybe for the bike lane, it would be good to consider enhancing it to be separated so vehicles can't encroach on the cyclist space. And then for signalized intersections, you'll want to look at bike ped accommodations, crosswalks, curb ramps, signal heads. Are there back plates? Do the signal heads seem to be lined up with the lanes properly? Anything with bicycle infrastructure, and then the timing. Does the timing seem correct? Lighting, pavement marking, and sign conditions would be the big ones. Are there anything else that anyone else can think of?
Utilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
We
location
have-
of head push buttons. Yeah, are they located properly? Yep. Okay,
How
another
about,
one.
conflicts, or either you see them or maybe you see evidence of conflicts like scarring on the roadway or debris.
Yeah, presence of head crossing signal heads. Yeah, and Lori, I thought I saw your hand up.
I forget the term. I don't think it's front loading and back loading. It's something similar. Where well, for transit, if there's like a bus stop before the intersection or after the intersection for like the cars, if it's right before or right after.
Yeah, so you're if the bus stops at the near side or the front side. Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, that's important to note if there is a bus stop for sure. I guess something else you could think of is if there's signals near each other, is there spillback? Do they seem to be coordinated well? And if not, that's something else you can absolutely note. And then just in all locations, you want to see, is there evidence of crashes? Because not all crashes get reported. There could be minor fender benders, but that's still a safety. Okay, it could become a huge issue. So you want to look for skid marks, debris, struck holes, and just general other evidence. If there's a bunch of crushed glass or plastic, those are pretty telltale signs. Railroad crossing picture. Is there one in here? There might be. Yes, if there's a railroad crossing, that's also very important to note. Lois, that's a good to note too, because railroads are definitely a different. I've learned railroads are different to work with. I have a project now, and I have because they're privately owned, but they're federally ran. They're definitely complicated. So if there is a railroad in one of your projects, that would require additional coordination for sure. And then once you are done with your field review, you're going to go and summarize all your findings. So existing conditions, the crash trends you're seeing, any safety concerns from those crash trends, and also that you've observed in the field. And then you're going to want to suggest any improvements that can be enacted. All right. So before I go in, okay. Yep, Lori.
Okay, I have a very basic question. When we're talking about safety field reviews, are we on the ground or is it in the
Yes.
car? On the ground. Okay, thank you.
Usually on the ground. Well, you can drive, but you want to be able to. When I've done safety field reviews, there's portions where I drive just to see what it is like to be a driver, but then I also want to go out and walk, and then sometimes you need to get closer to infrastructure and get in there and be able to take pictures and measurements if needed. So I'd say a mix of both. You want to see how the road users are seeing things from different perspectives. So whether it's a pet or in a vehicle. All right. Is there any other questions? I was just going to pause for questions before I get into the comparison. All right. So we'll talk really briefly just about road safety audits and safety field reviews because they're similar but not exactly the same. So a road safety audit is much more formal than a safety field review. It's performed also by an independent multidisciplinary team where safety field reviews are generally performed by the internal team, and they usually have designers where road safety audits sometimes include local police, people from the community, engineers, just a really bigger wide mix of people. And then they have a much more standardized qualitative report to point out any potential road issues and identify opportunities for improvements. So their main goals are to find safety concerns, note the severity impact of these concerns, and then identify any opportunities to mitigate them. And this is just a chart that was taken from FHWA. I'll just summarize it quickly, but like I said, the big differences between road safety audits and traditional safety field reviews is that there's just more formalities with road safety audits. You have that multidisciplinary team that is not an internal design team. You have a much more formal standardized report for road safety audits, and then a very standardized comment formal response report as well, where traditional or safety field reviews are not as formal, but you are still including information, but you don't have that standardized template. But they are similar. So the main three things that they have in common is that they identify safety concerns. They do have to get you out in the field for a field review, and you do include that good crash data analysis. So I'm going to jump into walk through an example of a safety field review. So for this location, we are in the city of Miami. We're at the signalized intersection of State Route 7 and Northwest 36th Street. You can see that it's near some major highways. There's some off ramps, on ramps, and then at the actual intersection itself, State Route 7 is running northbound, southbound, and then North 36th Street is eastbound, westbound. And we wanted to note that there is a fire station in the northwest quadrant of the intersection as well. And there are some other businesses scattered across. So first thing we did was pull our crash data. So there are 268 crashes that had been reported from the beginning of January 2016 till about the end of April in 2021. 3/4 of those crashes were property damage only. There were 3 fatal crashes, 3 crashes involving bicyclists, none with pedestrians. And then we broke down the major crash types. So at about 21% or 29% were side swipes, 24% rear ends, 21% left turns. And then the other notable crash trend that was observed was about 32% of these crashes were occurring in dark lighting conditions. So looking at these crash stats, is there anything that jumps out to anyone as surprising? The fatal crashes. Yeah. Zero ped. Yeah, zero ped also is a little surprising. There's a pretty high ped activity in that area. The one thing that stood out to me right away was that the major crash type at this intersection was sideswipe. Generally, I'd be expected to see rear end or left turn, also known as angle crashes. Those are the most common. So for me, that jumps out immediately. So with that in mind, that's something I would keep in the back of my mind going out in the field is what's happening that there are so many side swipes at this intersection. So we prepared these collision diagrams. This one is just for the year of 2016. There were a lot of crashes at this intersection. So they were broken down by year just to keep things readable and usable. Is there anything, I guess, that jumps out to you all looking at this crash diagram? If you guys can see it well enough. I mean, I can, but making sure. Lori?
I don't know what that thing is at the northwest corner, but there's a bunch of injuries there and across the street. So I'm wondering if people like that, I don't know if it's a business or that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's good to know. Actually, the northwest corner is actually the fire station. But there is a lot of driveways. You can see that on the north leg, there is a cluster of sideswipe crashes. So looking just at that, I would note that location somewhere I'd want to examine further. And then also on the south leg, there is also a cluster of sideswipe crashes. So it's just 1 year, but this was completed for all the years. Just want to walk through this one. So after all the collision diagrams were looked at, these were the main trends that popped out. Was there were several hit fixed object crashes on the west side of the fire station, one on the east side, and then there were 5 hit fixed objects on the north leg of SR7. A total of 9 eastbound left turn crashes, 12 westbound left turn crashes, a total of 19 sideswipe crashes traveling southbound on the northern leg of SR7, and then a total of 23 angle crashes. And then after everything had been plotted out for the collision diagrams, it was noted that several driveway accesses, so for the Burger King, KFC, and then the previous gas station, all had clusters that appeared to contribute to some of these crashes. And then in the chat, the type of nighttime crashes probably means lighting needs to be looked at further. Yep, absolutely. Looks like the sideswipe is being caused by the fire truck, people trying to get out of the way with not enough space. Yep, that definitely makes sense and that's a good observation. So pulling some information from the work program, it was found that a lighting retrofit project was actually completed along State Route 7, including our project area, completed around April 2019. So that's about halfway through the time period we collected data for crash analysis. And then a resurfacing project is to be completed adjacent to our project location. So we're recommending to consider maybe extending the project limits to include the study intersection, since there is a safety problem here as well. And just something to note that looking through the crash, if you had the full crash data to look at, if you wanted to note that there is a decrease in related dark crashes or nighttime crashes after the lighting retrofit project had been completed in 2018, which makes sense. At least on SR7, there was a slight decrease in those related crashes, which does make sense. That's something you'd want to keep an eye out for if you see some sort of trend like that, and then there is a related program that did occur. And then you're like, okay, that makes sense, instead of just having a decrease without necessarily a cause. And finally, getting into the actual field review. So observations were conducted on weekdays for the following periods. So we have AM peak, the PM peak, and then 2 nighttime observations. So I believe that the 6:30 to 8:31 was included because of some information spotted on the crash analysis that there was some peaks and crashes occurring in that time period. They want to figure out why. And 8:30 to 9:30 is a nice dark time. They want to see how things look with street lights, or there is issues with the street lights. And so here are the main observations that were observed during the morning and evening peaks. So all sorts of road users, from bicyclists to transit, were all observed using the intersection. There was some issues with the eastbound queues extending past the upstream signal during the morning peak hours. There was a bus stop located at the southwest corner, which did create some queue spillbacks into the intersection. Driveways near the intersection were often blocked by queues. And it was actually observed that firefighters had to get into the roadway by foot to stop traffic to allow fire trucks to get in and out of the station. So here's some images taken. You can see the image on the left that was just showing the queuing from the eastbound direction. And then the image on the right is showing the spillback into the intersection caused by that transit stop that's located a little bit just in front of that Burger King sign. You can see people in the intersection when it's red, not supposed to be. So that can cause potential issues. So for nighttime observations, it was noted that vehicles were driving at much higher speeds, less people on the roads. Unfortunately, that makes sense. The people decide they want to fly when there's no traffic. And it was also noted that there were several inoperative streetlights. You can see the image. The red circles indicate where there was a streetlight that just was not working under an underpass adjacent to the intersection. And then we wanted to look at just adjacent properties as well. So this was taken outside of the fire station. Just looking at this image, is there anything that sticks out to you all? no bike lane, need for bollards. Yep, crooked bollards, maybe got hit, evidence of collision with post. Yeah, so that's what you're seeing that these bollards had been struck, and there was damage. So a little bit worried about there may be a potential safety concern for pedestrians if cars are jumping over the curb onto the sidewalk and making contact with those bollards. So definitely a potential safety issue right there. So yep, great evidence of crashes occurring. So yep, great observations. Then looking at infrastructure at the actual intersection. So signal heads don't have backplates, which adding those would be a great way to just increase visibility for drivers, especially at nighttime. The north and southbound approaches do have reverse curves with advisory speeds of 25 miles per hour. The westbound approach has a reverse curve and a signal ahead warning sign. Eastbound left turn vehicles do appear to have some sight distance issues due to the skew of the intersection. And there is a light pole just missing on the northwest corner of the intersection. Some more images that were taken. So the image on the left showing some of the sight distance issues for those eastbound left turning vehicles. And then the image on the right showing the missing light pole that was replaced with a traffic cone, which is definitely a tripping hazard and not the most safe thing to have out there right near a ped crossing. So as I mentioned earlier, I believe talking with Lori, sometimes these observations do lead to additional studies. You see things, you want to look further about what's going on. So because high speeds were observed, they went back and conducted a spot speed study between those hours of 6:30 and 8:30. And it was determined that their 85th percentile speeds that were caught were as much as 11 miles per hour higher than the posted speed limit. So speed was definitely a concern, and they wanted to get some good evidence of that and note that in the report. Similarly, the eastbound left turn was noted that it appears to be some sight distance issues. So they took measurements for both the westbound and eastbound left turns. No issues with the westbound left turn for sight distance, but for the eastbound left turn, the available sight distance was only 150 feet, while the required is 465. So noting that there is an issue there and could be a cause for crashes that are occurring at the intersection. Just because of all the curves of the intersection, also examined if the set speeds for those curves were appropriate. Luckily, it was determined that the posted speed or the advisory speed that had been posted was less than the maximum safe speed to travel those curves. So what had been posted out in the field is appropriate. So there's no change or no recommendation for any changes there. Also with the signal, it's important just to review your clearance intervals, so your yellow and all red times. So it was determined that the existing yellow clearance was more than enough. There's more than enough time for that, but the all red was a little low. So they recommended shifting some of that yellow time to the red time. And that way you're not affecting your green time and not upsetting necessarily the drivers, saying there's not as much green time for them to get through. You're just shifting some of that clearance time from the yellow to the red. All right, so there are 3 categories of recommendations that came out of this safety field review. But before I reveal them, you guys can feel free to unmute yourself, put in the chat. What are some recommendations you all would make given that information we just walked through for this intersection?
Will you show us the intersection back?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So this is that skew angle there. curb extension, yeah. More lighting and signal coordination, yeah, with that, the spill back to the other intersection, absolutely, and number of nighttime crashes, more lighting would be better. Those are some good ideas for sure. We can go through what was actually recommended. So for roadway, it was suggested to install guardrail in the northwest corner where those bollards were. A signage, do not start crossing intersection of buses stopped ahead. Yeah, that would be a great low cost safety countermeasure right there, Lois. That's a great one. But looking at where those bollards were, they suggested to install guardrail, just protect the fire station, a pretty critical piece of infrastructure for the community. It would be getting the damage. You don't want to get a fire station damaged. Recommended just installing speed feedback signs because there was that evidence of high speeds in the off-peak hours. Approaching the intersection, reduce the speed limit. So for SR7, the southbound lanes had a higher speed limit than the northbound lanes. So just recommended to reduce it. So we have some similar speed limits for the same length of roadway. So drivers' expectations are the same. Realign the east legs pavement markings to be more parallel with the northbound lanes just to lessen that skew angle for those folks that are trying to make that left turn. And adjust, there also was noted there was a valve in the middle of the west lake crosswalk that was not flush with the pavement marking. So just the pavement, so just that, so it's no longer a tripping hazard. So for the signal modifications, as I already noted, they recommended to update the yellow and all red clearance times. Change the traffic signal to allow protected only turns, try to eliminate some of those angle and left turn crashes, and then just add retroreflective backplates to all signal heads. Yeah, it's a proven safety countermeasure. It's pretty effective and just adds visibility to the signals for drivers, especially coming around curves. And then for street lighting, Ed mentioned in the chat, we want to add some more street lighting, replace that missing light pole in the northwest corner, and then fix those street lights that were noted in the field observation. So that is all I have for this module. So if there's any other questions, you want to go through some of the recommended. Yep, Catherine.
Hey everyone, so not really a recommendation, just a clarification of District 4 and road safety audits. So I know you had a couple slides kind of clarifying the difference between just standard field reviews and road safety audits. So we're really trying in our district, and I don't know about others statewide, but to be more proactive on the road safety audits. So we are picking one per county per fiscal year. So we have 5 counties that we're doing proactively based on different types of data and understanding of things, but we're not necessarily waiting for someone to complain. And then starting next fiscal year, we are going to be emailing all the department heads in District 4 saying, here's our 5 proactive road safety audits. If you have any staff that live in the corridor that are passionate about the area, et cetera. So instead of it just being, like you mentioned, the municipalities or maybe the law enforcement or different people that are really engaged in that area, it's the commuters that drive through it that work for DOT that might be passionate about improving safety in that corridor. So we're really going to elevate them even more next year. So you'll start seeing more communication on road safety audits in District 4. So I just wanted to share that.
Lori?
I was just thinking about pedestrians, and I've seen this coming off of 95. I don't know if it's officially a state road. I feel like it is in some areas, but people selling things on the side of the road or collecting money. But then, like the light turns green and you have to wait for somebody to cross over safely. And I don't know, that hasn't been really discussed.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'm not sure what, I guess, any laws regulation is for that. I know in Pennsylvania, they've been trying to crack down a little bit further on that because there has been issues and just people not being able to move. So they've been a little bit more strict about like, loitering and panhandling and such. But yeah, I'm not sure for Florida, but that is definitely also, so that'd be something good to observe if you're out in the field and you see that, make a note of that, because that can definitely cause safety issues or even just operational issues if everyone has to stay put for an extra couple seconds. Carla?
I have a question for kind of one of the proposed improvements on this project was the putting in guardrail.
Yeah.
I've kind of had a kind of back and forth with people who are for and kind of against guardrail just because it is a maintenance issue and I've heard that you technically would not put guardrail to protect a building. So in this case, are you saying that you would put it on the curb essentially to protect pedestrians? Like how, if anyone also in District 4 has any ideas on, because there is currently a project that we're looking at for Tracy's group, Tracy and Katie's group, of putting in guardrail because cars have run off the road and have hit a building, and kind of going back and forth on like, would this necessarily warrant guardrail use because it's not necessarily that they've hit a pedestrian, but there could be a concern that they are going over a sidewalk and hitting a building because they're speeding. So just kind of want an open discussion about that and how that played into this project.
So quick other question. Is the guardrail protecting the building or is the guardrail protecting the occupant of the vehicle?
I'll say in this
Would-
case, both.
What's the least worst collision? With the building or with guardrail?
It would be with the guardrail.
Yeah, so I think that's how I would think about it. I mean, it's one of those, like, the department doesn't want to be responsible for private property. But there's also realities of what exists and what we can do. But in this case, I think it's a judgment call of whether the guardrail is more beneficial to be there for the pedestrian or for the building, right? Because we use guardrail protect against drop-offs, against water hazards, yeah, concrete piers and bridges, things like that. I would see this as kind of the same aspect as even if it's not on our property or the state's property, it's still a hazard to protect the driver from. Let's see, Tracy had her hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, so we get many requests for guardrail, to install guardrail to protect the building, sometimes protect pedestrian. And so the first thing we look at is, do we have a space for guardrail? Is that appropriate to put a guardrail there? The guardrail itself could be hazard. So before, if the motorists have the enough, like a shoulder is wide enough, they have lots of space, they're not gonna run into the water. If you put a guardrail there very close to the roadway, it could kill the driver earlier. So the vehicle have to hit the guardrail in certain angle. If they like perpendicular hit the guardrail, it's more severe than just running, out of the roadway. But there's no like a deep slope or no water. So people don't, the general public does not understand like guardrail, itself could be hazard. So that's the lots of requests we saw, because they don't know that. They just think, well, we'll have guardrail to protect me. And also lots of times, and it's not feasible. Like if you talk about somewhere like more urbanized, you don't have a space to put a guardrail, because the guardrail have to be put appropriately, have enough space and enough like length. If you just put like for a small section, it's not gonna do anything. So there's a lot of design concern and the need, the analysis for the need of guardrail for engineers to, to look at. Yeah. And lots of times we look at the course of action and also what's the reason, what's it like route for the for vehicle hitting the building or run to run off the road. Lots of times because of speeding. So instead of put the guardrail, when we have no space for the guardrail, we're gonna look at how to reduce the speed before vehicle, get to the intersection or running out of the road. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Lori?
Hypothetically, for a case in this scenario, I guess it depends, but somebody had an idea of if a community is saying, hey, can you put the guardrail, offering ideas such as planting trees that maybe create a barrier. I don't know, those might be deadly as well if somebody hits like a tree trunk or something. But yeah, I feel like lighting might also help in certain situations. And then there are places in the district that I've noticed on a separate topic that their street name is not what Google Maps has. So it was like very confusing to drive around because I'm like, well, Google Maps is telling me this, but then I see the name of this street and it's a totally different name. So those are, I mean, that's out of our purview, but just a thought.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, planting the trees instead of the guardrail might not, I would say probably lean away from that one, especially if the bollards are being struck in that scenario. But if you're looking for like some encroachment or shading and there hasn't been a bunch of hit fixed objects over there, I think trees are always a great option for that in that case. If there is not any other, okay, Billy, right when I was gonna say it.
Yeah, I guess that's one of anyone that's encountered a situation like I guess in the RS that you example you provided, there are a lot of businesses next to the intersection, but I guess a lot of them are like low turning traffic at those locations. Let's say for example a Burger King near intersection. I guess since somebody eats Burger King now, was added, right? And everything's fine for I guess 4 years, but they reintroduced chicken fries and like the traffic just exploded and you're getting like spilled back to the intersection. In terms of like I guess the RSC observation or implementations that DOT can do, like is there I guess other than signal timing or just some sort of like temporary means of traffic, like has there been a situation similar to this or is it just more so like coordination with the business itself?
That's a hard one because I worked in access management for a good long time, and it's a little bit easier if they're coming in fresh, but a redevelopment, there was, depending on where it's at, I think you have a few options, but none of them are overly palatable. So that theoretically, the permit that is given for each place, and I've only seen this happen once, the permit that's given for each location is contingent on a certain use and level of traffic. If there's a significant change, so the use case changes or traffic increases by a certain degree, the permit is it's technically not valid anymore. So I've only heard of one case of the state, going out and closing a driveway like that, and it was immediately taken up the next day. They basically just dropped it. It was one of our rural counties in the center of the state. They dropped barrier wall and crossed the driveway. It didn't go over very well. but they should theoretically come back in for a reevaluation. What I have seen, I didn't see it happen yet. So there's a corner site that came in. They were permitted under a specific condition. It was redeveloped to a different condition. Significant change occurred. We were working to make them change their site. Central Office Legal would not let us do it. As someone called up to Central Office and it became an issue. So what we looked at in that case was what can we do on the roadway? And at that point, the only thing we really could do, and we considered if it became a problem, is it was on the right turn lane of an intersection. And what we were worried about was the traffic shooting across the turn lane, 3 lanes of through traffic, and then into the furthest of the 2 left turn lanes so they can do U-turns. We did discuss essentially putting a concrete separator between the travel lanes and the right turn lane across the driveway. Because theoretically, there's certain requirements for removal of access or change in access. Theoretically, a right turn lane that's already on a median section, if there's not a median opening directly across from it, it does not theoretically it's not left out. It's right in, right out. So as long as you maintain right in, right out, you're still theoretically maintaining access. So that was one of the things we did look at, is if it became we were going to monitor, and if it became a problem, we would build a 2-foot traffic separator between the through lane and the right turn lane at that point to prevent the movement. But that is a very difficult one. I don't know that there's a lot that can be done other than what Tracy said earlier, and that's that like lowering speed, because it really truly is lowering speed doesn't necessarily solve your problems, but it makes the impact of your problems much less.